And we can work and involve our students in different activities, co-create knowledge with them, so that we sort of reduce this gap between the students, the other side, and this other side. We need them to see the path. We need them to see the kind of struggles that we go through, but what we are able to produce at the end of the day. We need to connect our teaching to contemporary issues. Yes, I'm a historian. I've written a history of landslides in Bududa, and I was motivated to write about the history of landslides in Bududa because of the increasing concern that people were refusing. You know, there were all accusations that these people have been given land in good places, but they don't want to leave Bududa. They are just stupid. It seems they want to die. And I said, no, for me as a historian, I want to understand the history of landslides in this place and how people managed the landslides in the past and why they are not moving away. If we don't understand why they're moving away, we can spend so much money buying land and building them houses elsewhere, but they will not go. So we need to disseminate our scholarship to avoid the audience, and our research should not just be motivated by curiosity, and I've just given you the example of my work on Bududa. The public is our ally, so let's keep our ally close. We need to communicate effectively, and this was already talked about, so I'm going to skip that slide because at the beginning when we had the earlier presentation, there was a lot of emphasis on communication. And then we also need to emphasis on developing soft skills, interpersonal behavior traits, things like teamwork, things like leadership, because now we are at a point where employers are not so much interested in what you know, but rather what you can do. So if you feel so powerful that because you are a lawyer, you cannot be able to do photocopying in the office, sorry. You will not have that position. And so we need to think about the soft skills. Placements, we need to have placements or internships where we connect our learners to the real world. And I think all universities in Uganda are now doing that so that students take time to go and spend time in the real world with the communities and learn what is expected of them. But there's also a call for us to return to the classical function of humanities as therapy. And here I'm thinking about my predecessor, again, Professor Mangeni. I'm sure the conversation of humanities as therapy is one that is very close to your heart. So how can we use humanities for this? And the examples are many, but this dates back to the biblical times. And I share that quote there, that whenever the tormenting spirit from God troubled Saul, David would play the harp, and then Saul would feel better, and the tormenting spirit would go away. So, again, in different ways. I don't know what happens, I don't know the situation in most of our facilities here, but going to school in the US, I know that most hospitals had social workers from humanistic background. I know somebody who had done religion, who actually are fully time employed by the hospitals to talk to the patients and encourage them from a humanistic angle. So we need to really explore the therapeutic aspects of this, and just know that humanistic therapy is one way of connecting humanities to humanity. We also need to think about how we turn knowledge within humanities for practical use. And I think one of the areas that I can point out here is the issue of ethics, whether in research or biomedical ethics or environmental ethics. There are things that have developed during the last quarter of the 20th century, where you cannot run big projects without having a cultural impact assessment. So there are all the things where, as scholars in the humanities, we can put our theoretical knowledge into practical use. So when Professor mentioned here that she was asked for 60 archaeologists, it's real. And it is good that Chambogo is training archaeologists now, because maybe about 20 years ago or less than 20, we didn't have archaeology training in Uganda at all. So I remember when I was first put on a project to go and work on cultural impact assessment, it was because I was a historian, and so the assumption was that history is close to archaeology, and since there's no archaeology in Uganda, let's take historians to participate on this project. But others saw beyond that, and we've moved on. Yes, so again, let's not sit in the university comfortably as the ivory tower, but let's continue to engage with the communities. But also, as humanities scholars and practitioners, we have a critical role to play in fostering a critical civil society. Of course, sometimes it's risky. If you don't have the courage, you might not be able to do certain things or say certain things. But those who are like the gentleman who introduced me have the courage to speak on public radio about issues that concern all of us. So for most of those radio programs, you realize that the people they get to really talk about these critical issues will be from the humanities. And they invite people from medicine if there are specific things they want them to speak to, or from engineering. I was also thinking that maybe it's a time that we thought about creating a humanities consortium of sorts within Uganda, where we amplify the values of our work. This is an open suggestion. So, to the students, as I get close to concluding, I want to say that turn the lack of clear career path into a strength. Okay? So do not say for us the only thing when they ask you what you can do. Surely there are things that you can do, and you should be able to speak to those things that you can do. And I had this little quote from someone who said, creativity, flexibility, and adaptability of people trained in humanities are in demand, where employers need to employ people who can cope with change and uncertainty. So if you've done your defined professional course and you can't do anything else, you will stay there. There are people who will be looking for those who are flexible and are ready to cope and work with what is available. And I want to say that you all have the ability to solve complex problems, through organized reasoning, through critical analysis, and the understanding of morality, ethics, and morality. So let's take that serious. And clearly, humanities are not the problem. I think the problem is somewhere else, but we can blame the humanities. So, I'm sure that you've all heard about Charles Darwin, the natural scientist. And I picked this quote from his autobiography. And he says, "My mind seems to have become a kind of machine for grinding general laws out of the large collection of facts. If I had to live my life again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. The loss of these tastes is a loss of happiness and may possibly be injurious to the intellect and to the moral character by enfeebling the emotional part of our nature." So he wrote his autobiography a year before he passed on. And you can see this is a person who had been so much into science that now he was realizing that he had missed enjoying in the humanities. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end.